Many people can encourage and empower their staff to give them not positive feedback, but proper feedback on any situation. They're open to listening. They have great ideas and let them percolate among the staff. They use the staff. They use the oval table. Then you'll get every now and then that one that knows he's the smartest man in the room. And that can be very dangerous sometimes. Again, because you can have the wisest staff you can out there. But if you don't listen to them, it doesn't do any good. And I think it is so important for you as a subordinate of a person like that is to figure out, how do I get the right information across? How do I get him or her to buy into what is right, not what he's thinking right now? And so you have to be pretty skillful in your communication, in knowing what that person is like.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rishi Katz, and welcome to the Oval Table, where we discuss all things related to helping those who live and work within your business how to survive, thrive, avoid pitfalls, have more fun, and become successful faster. Getting advice and input from someone outside of your business can make a big difference, and that's what we seek to do for you each and every week. Here at the Oval Table, we believe that every voice matters, and we want to model how that works. Often the advice that makes the difference comes from where you least expect it. We seek every week to provide a lens for a different way to do business. So much more is possible when everyone's ideas make it to the table. Let me introduce you to our co-hosts, Doug Bowers, Vaughn Johnson, and Carl Walsh.
If you want to start or build or expand your business, learn from experts who have been where you want to be. Tune in to the Oval Table.
Well, we are very fortunate to have Jim Hearn back with us again as a friend of the show at this point. And I just want to remind people who Dr. Hearn is. Dr. Hearn worked for 48 years in a variety of professions that span active Vietnam-era Army, academe, and federal service with the Department of the Army, including his position with the Army Corps of Engineers, which was Senior Executive Service Director, Regional Business. And in that capacity, he had a budget of $5 billion and was in charge of that operating budget, technical experts in engineering and construction, strategic planning, and organizational governance. So a man with quite a lot of experience. Welcome again, Dr. Hearn. Now today, we wanted to go over the territory of how do you work with a charismatic and forceful leader. If you're the employee, if you're a manager under one of these types, how do you go about working with that person?
Well, Carl, thank you for having me back again. And that's quite a good topic. I'm sure most of us have always had bosses of varying different types who've had the good, the bad, and probably the ugly along with that. And many of them can be charismatic, but charismatic can have many different ranges of how they are. In my last job as a senior executive service member of the Northwestern Division of the Corps of Engineers, I had 6 general officers that I worked for. 5 of them, I would say they were all charismatic in one way or another. 5 of them you would follow anywhere. Another one you might want to follow not too far. But yet they were all how they were. Many people can encourage and empower their staff to give them not positive feedback, but proper feedback on any situation. They're open to listening. They have great ideas and let them percolate among the staff. They use the staff. They use the oval table. Then you'll get every now and then that one that knows he's the smartest man in the room. And that can be very dangerous sometimes. Again, because you can have the wisest staff you can out there, but if you don't listen to them, it doesn't do any good. And I think it is so important for you as a subordinate of a person like that is to figure out, how do I get the right information across? How do I get him or her to buy into what is right, not what he's thinking right now? And so you have to be pretty skillful in your communication, knowing what that person is like. Many of you out there are probably taking the Myers-Briggs type indicator. I'm a firm believer in the Myers-Briggs because over the years that I've taken, I haven't varied very much. I'm off the scale in a number of categories. And by knowing yourself, you got an idea of what your weak points are and how to work on, how to mitigate them. But in the same way of observing your supervisor or your charismatic leader, what is he like? Is he going to be receptive to information? How do I bring it across to him? Do I set it up where he actually thinks of it, but I've just placed all the seeds out there and he followed them? Some people just take it, right off the bat. Hey, good idea. Let's sit down and talk about that. And so it's your responsibility, I think, as that subordinate member, and maybe in some cases with your colleagues, how do we get our information to the boss? And I think the boss is charismatic, but also receptive. Many times that charismatic leader knows he doesn't have to be out in front. He can lead from anywhere and just allow his staff to do a good job. But that one that has, I would say, somewhat of a fragile ego, that any kind of criticism or request for clarification might be received in the wrong way, has to be handled with kid gloves.
Let me turn that on its head just a little bit there, Jim, which is sometimes you can have a personality at the table who is not the leader, who is charismatic, who is forceful, or is fragile and disruptive. Now, how, as a leader, do you handle that?
Very good question, and unfortunately, a very common one that we've seen. Some people just have to be the loudest one on the table,
right? And
they figure by their loudness or their way they approach things over there, they'll win the argument. I think what you have to do is, I would avoid confrontations on the spot. You don't want to get into any kind of, acrimonious dialogue at the table, but you might want to, after the meeting, call that person aside and just say, that's unacceptable in the way we manage our organization here. And have a heart-to-heart talk, how that affects the other people at the table that have good ideas. Back to the book about alpha dogs. We have some of those situations in there, and how does the boss resolve those kinds of things? You got to point that wayward individual into how that his or her actions affect the whole organization. And you can poison an organization with one bad apple out there. It's a matter of, how do I get that person back on track, because they do have a lot to offer. But I hate to say it, at some point it's fish or cut bait. You got to make sure that person either is going to be part of the team or they're not going to be part of the team, because otherwise you cannot let that happen for a long period of time. It's just untenable for an organization to have it that way. I'm sure we've all seen that out there in the work world, and it is something that is true. And then what you don't want is then somebody at the table to take up the fight, because then you're not going to get anything done.
No, I can see that. Early on in my career, I was having a really bad day, and I was that person at the table who was, frankly, rather disruptive. And I learned a lot from that, because the person in charge handled it beautifully and handled it afterwards, exactly as you outlined there. And so it's critically important that she got me back on track and got me to be the person I normally was. And things went on from there.
And occasionally, a team will rectify itself in some cases, where the teammates will call that person aside and say, this is unacceptable.
Yeah.
And we having a bad day today, what was the reason that you took this course of action that you did today? Or the behavior? Is this a common occurrence, or is this a one time? If it's a one time, then you probably figure out there's an event that happened. It's the idea of, are you addressing the symptom, or are you addressing the cause?
Yeah.
In many cases, the outburst at the meeting or the staff meeting or whatever it is like that outburst might be a symptom of something that's underlying, whether it's a family situation, a personal situation with his health or something like that. And getting to the root cause is really important, and rather just addressing the symptom. Because if it's uncharacteristic, then pretty certain that there was something going on that's underlying the whole thing. If he does that all the time, then probably should have been addressed a while ago and needs to get back on track again, one way or the other. You hate to say it, but you hate to not fire a person, but ask a person to leave if you have not done everything possible to try to fix that individual and get him back on the team again. And once you've gone through all the opportunities you've had and all the counseling and coaching and mentoring, and it still does nothing, then you got to cut bait. Charismatic leaders at the top, the most unassuming, to me, many times are the smartest ones. He was the smartest guy in the room, but everybody around him just didn't. They believed they ran everything, and he just kind of guided the ship. I mean, that's what the best ones do. They guide the ship. And when you work for a person like that, as we talked a little bit last week over there, coming to work every day just makes you feel good. When you got a boss that you can sit there and talk to any way you want, who's going to give you ideas to make you as a better person, a better leader, a better manager, and make the overall organization better. People want to work for winning organizations. You see it in sports all the time. People jump teams because they get tired of losing. Maybe they're still getting a lot of money. Money is not the most important thing in a person's choice of a career and how they stay with an organization. I look at it the way Maslow looked at it, his hierarchy of needs. Once you've taken care of the physiological and the social, and, the guy's got food on the table, we got a shelter for the house, my family is happy. After that, things become a little different. What I look for is different than just more of the bottom, more of the physiological, and I think that's where, working for a successful team, working for a team that makes you feel good every day going in there, is really an important thing. I was reading an article this morning online. I went to my doctorate's from USC. And if those of you who follow football or the Pac-12 conference, USC's had some problems, and they fired the coach not last week before last. And the article today was, why was that coach not successful? And they said he was your wonderful partner, your great friend. He was a really charismatic in the sense of taking care of people. But that can just go so far if you're not developing people. People want to grow also in their profession to maximize their potential. If you're just being a good friend, but not maximizing the potential, you have an organization that's probably struggling. And they were. They were good. They were not great the way they used to be. And I think the administration, the athletic director said, we just have to make a change. We got to change the attitude here back to what it was in the history of USC, with Pete Carroll and the many coaches before that were just expected to be at the top of their profession rather than just, pretty good.
I was just going to say, as a graduate of UCLA, I'm quite pleased with what's going on at USC these days.
Apparently, the other Pac-12 coaches said over there, "Oh, you should have kept him. You should have kept him." I think it's important that we talked about situational leadership the last time and what is appropriate at any one different time on there. And I think that's important also. Maybe you're too people-centered when you should have been more task-oriented. Mm-hmm. There's got to be the mix of both of those things. The tasks have to get done. You got to develop the people. You got to make sure that your business is successful, and then you can take care of people. You got to have that right mix on there. If you just everything is taking care of people, but you're not getting a task done, you have as much trouble as if you're just a slave driver. Very task oriented, and the people hate you. I mean, you talk about charismatic leaders, and you said UCLA, John Wooden. I mean, there's the epitome of a charismatic leader. He had the mix of both of those things. I remember a story that I read about. I coached a basketball team one time, and we did actually pretty well over there. And they gave me, as a kind of a thank you, they gave me a book, and it was one of John Wooden's books, The Wisdom of John Wooden. And remember, he coached Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, when he was Lou Alcindor at that time. And actually, I played against him in high school in the CHSA championships in New York. I sat on a bench. I didn't do anything over there. I could have punched him in the knee. It's about as much I could do then. But he was kind of grousing about the way Wooden was treating him, knowing how well he was thought of, and he was this great player, and this whole everything about him. And Wooden just said, "You can sit on the bench for the rest of the year for if you want to take that attitude, you'll sit the rest of the season." And Wooden was not kidding. He would have sat him the rest of the season. And Kareem Jabbar said, "Yeah, okay, maybe I need to kind of rethink the way he's asking me to work." And so Wooden, he was the mix of everything. And you saw the way people talk about it. It's with total reverence that they talk about him. Boy, what a thing to have as your legacy, that people think about you that way.
And the amazing thing is, I remember riding an elevator with him one afternoon when I was a student there. He was the most unassuming man that you could imagine. And if you didn't know he was John Wooden, you'd never guess. You'd never guess.
Yeah.
Does the leader need to concern himself or herself with how the other people are feeling about themselves?
I think absolutely. I think it's important, as we talked about, being part of a winning team. Again, because the notoriety, the positive vibrations are not getting down to the whole team. Maybe it's being shared among senior leadership. What about the workforce? It's important to ensure the workforce that they are part of this great team, no matter who they are. I'll never forget a story I got one time about NASA. And it's how you empower the entire organization. And one of my old bosses over there was having a tour of NASA. And there was a whole bunch of senior leaders, and he was going around everything, and you're showing him the launch area and everything like that, in the control room. And there was this janitor in the corner sweeping up things over there. And they said, "Oh, what do you do here?" And the janitor said, "I help launch that rocket." And they said, "Oh, what do you mean? If this place isn't clean, they can't do their business right. If they can't do it right, that rocket doesn't go up." Talk about connection of the whole organization. That's what you want. When we used to talk about, performance management, you're talking about, your performance standards. One thing I used to try to do is showing where that person fit in the organization. When somebody says, "I am just a budget analyst," you are not just anything. If you're a part of this organization, you're an integral part of this organization. If you didn't do that accounting at the lowest level down here, then this project might not have the money it needs, which means we couldn't build this over here, which this great thing over here will never get done. And so you may be just the something down here. You are not. If you don't do your job, this thing, like that NASA thing, if the janitor doesn't clean well, that rocket doesn't go up. That kind of connection within an organization is absolutely critical to make people feel part of it. And that's why it's important. I remember Hewlett Packard was noted in the olden days for management by wandering around, MBWA. And that was so important for the leader of Hewlett Packard to go down and meet his people, to them to see that he's a real person and that he's interested in what they have to say and do. There is nothing more important than the staff feeling part of that organization. In the military, they have a thing called coins of excellence. And most commanders, lieutenant colonel and up, have them. And what it is when they come across one of their staff doing something that's really out of the ordinary, they may get a coin of excellence. And then people have collections of them for the things that they've done. And sometimes it's different leaders, different organizations and stuff. I've seen them, people with 50 and 60 and 100 of these coins. But it's just that little memento of that little experience of being recognized for not doing something extraordinary, but something above average every day. It's that kind of little recognition that is so important to people that will stay with them. The boss came by and he just said, "Hey, well, I did a great job today." That is enough in many cases. It's not that bonus at the end of the year. It's that pat on the back every other day, of recognizing that what I do is important, that what I do is integral to the organization. And he's asking how I can do it better. Do I need more training? Do you have any ideas that'll make this organization better? That kind of empowerment, we talk about that a lot. That is an important term, empowering people to give you ideas. And we talked about the charismatic leader. And he gets his ideas from people. He may take them and run with them. But it's those ideas that are fed up to a charismatic leader that lets him, I never thought about that. Here's what we can do. He's digesting all that information that's out there and then using it, for the betterment of the whole organization.
Jim, here's a situation that I've seen repeatedly, is that someone at a much lower level is dealing with the customer or dealing with a vendor, and something comes up that's important. Occurs to that person that I have an idea. So that person goes to their direct report and says, I have this idea, this came up because of this experience. And then that person goes up to the charismatic leader, perhaps, and says, I have an idea. And I think that's where the flow of good ideas stop. Because if I'm not going to get credit for sticking my neck out and doing something, then why should I bother to do anything? What responsibility does the charismatic, the big-time leader have for bringing those ideas to the fore, even though the source is a frontline person?
That's always the risk as a senior leader. We have a lot of what we call sycophants out there, that they will take credit for things that their underlings are giving to them. They'll polish the apple for the senior leader, for the charismatic leader. And that's why, back to the management by wandering around concept, you need to get out to the lower levels and talk to the staff out there. How are you, just how is the day going? Tell me about your job. Well, I came up with this idea. Ooh, I thought my other boss said he came up with that idea. So it's a matter of getting out, not just to among your senior leaders, but the next level down. Being able to kind of communicate with them, knowing that they can come directly to you. In many cases in the military, commander has an open door policy. Anybody can come in and talk to me. And, schedule and stuff like that. And if it's something that's, I would say, controversial, maybe you don't have to go through your supervisor. After we talk about it, I might send you back to your supervisor because, we want to follow the chain of command. We don't want a policy where everybody goes around your boss. If that's happening, then obviously there is something wrong with the organization. And so by allowing an open door, and once you see that, I see what the problem is, send that person back. I want you to sit down with that next line supervisor and see if we can talk out how you communicate, to me through him, and I think that's one way of letting that next level supervisor that seems to be taking credit for their subordinates' work that, you don't need to do that. I used to always say, when I was in Afghanistan one time, we used to brief General Petraeus, and I did a number of debriefings. My boss, colleague, that time, a one-star general, took me aside one day and he said, colonels brief, generals don't brief. And my rank was one-star equivalent. And so I said, okay, got it, boss. So in the future briefings, I would introduce the briefing to General Petraeus and all the staff that were there, but I would have my subordinates brief. And, General Petraeus said at one time, we had done something. I said, my staff knew, he said, if you're here, I know the meeting will go well. He didn't need to know, that I was doing all the work, that the staff was doing the briefing. He knows if you set this up, I know it's going to work. And that's what you want. You want that you don't have to do the work, but if your staff does the job well, they know you had something to do with it because you're the ones who trained, mentored, coached, and got those people ready to do their job. And so, the higher up you go, the less you should have to do in many cases. You want to focus on your subordinate people to give them an opportunity to shine. They're going to be scared. I talk about, I'm going to be scared. Yeah, sure, you're going to be scared. You better be scared. You better be nervous because that's what gives the presentation energy, the fact that you are nervous. If you're not, you're probably boring.
Jim, is there a distinction between charismatic leaders and people with executive presence. That's a term in my industry that I hear a lot. That person has executive presence.
I think they can be together, but they can be different also. The charismatic leader, look at Steve Jobs. Did he dress like a charismatic leader, like an executive? No, he wore a turtleneck, but he was clearly a charismatic leader, but vice versa. You could have, you wear the right Brooks Brothers suit, perfectly tailored, everything like that. You come in there looking the part. And in some cases, that's important. I remember, the Army has their battle dress uniform when they go into combat over there. I remember going and wearing a 3-piece suit. The guy said, "What are you doing?" I said, "This is my battle uniform." You want to go out, you want to go in there, and people will say, "This guy's serious." I interviewed for a job one time when I ran this base in Germany, and it was a small base, 2,000 people, full service open. I was interviewing for the job, and I came in with a 3-piece suit on, and remember, I was asked at the interview, "Well, this is Dexine. You're dressed in a 3-piece suit, but this is just a little backwater place." I said, "Shouldn't he be represented by the best that you can be? You want people to know, when I'm here, I am representing you, and I'm going to look my best, and those people are going to know I'm here to represent you." So it's a matter of, it gives people confidence sometimes, where maybe they're not as charismatic as, say, a Steve Jobs is, but they're good enough to know how to run an organization, allowing their people to be successful, but they want their boss to look the part.
Sometimes I think if you're the leader and you dress for the part, that you do the kinds of things that big leaders do, that it inspires confidence in yourself.
And the same thing when you walk into an interview. You walk in there with a confident, erect stance, with a good stride, with a smile on your face, with a good handshake. It's showing that you are not afraid. You are in here because this is important, and I'm going to show you why you want to hire me.
So as a leader, then you kind of set the tone for the meeting.
You do. Absolutely. Absolutely. You can, if you're not an organized person, you can have a meeting go down the tubes in a minute because things are just bouncing around and nothing gets done. Having an agenda, following the agenda.
Another example that I've seen recently is I've been watching the Schwarzkopf press conferences when he was in Gulf One. He had full camo on, but man, was it crisp. He hadn't slept in that thing. He was just right to the T on stuff. So he was bringing forth that image that I'm here and I'm going to tell you something important. And let's go. And his staff was there helping him, but there's no backing off from who he was.
So the primary topic of our interview was charismatic leaders. And I didn't get an opportunity to ask Jim a question that I want to ask the two of you, which is, does charisma, which is necessary to be a charismatic leader, that's a trait of charismatic leaders, is charisma. Does charisma require emotional intelligence? And if it does, can emotional intelligence be taught or developed? What do you think?
Well, I think charisma is something that can be developed in someone that has the raw material to do it with. But can you turn somebody who has no emotional intelligence, who does not have charisma, can you make them a great charismatic leader? I don't think so.
I agree.
I think, there are tools that somebody that has it can use to strengthen it, but I don't think you can start from scratch. You either got it or you don't.
There was an article I read once about emotional intelligence that used the example of basketball. It said, you can teach basketball to a room full of people. Room full of people will learn how to play basketball, and you could do that month after month after month after month and never once see a Kobe Bryant. Because Kobe Bryant had talent he was born with. and he was able to build on that talent and become legendary as a consequence. So emotional intelligence, if you look at it in that sort of framework, is the same thing. You're born with a sense of empathy, a sense of being able to step in somebody else's shoes and look at the world from their point of view. And you can take that, and if you add the right qualities of management and communications, the ability to communicate well, you might actually have a charismatic and positive leader. But if you take those same qualities and if that person is not a good person, you could have a very charismatic but evil individual.
Right. That's where you get the charismatic sociopath, which many sociopaths are very charismatic. One of the things that you're getting into here is Douglas's book, We Are Alpha Dogs, where there are certain characters, certain business personalities that you probably can't build. You have to find them and hire them. Now, they can learn their craft. An accountant can learn how to be an accountant, but he's got to have that mindset that he loves numbers. He loves to see the pieces fit together in a mathematical way. That's got to be there. You can't give that to someone. It's got to be there. And then you teach them the accounting.
I think there's a difference between having an intuitive skill and having a learned skill. That you can learn how to play an instrument, for example, but that doesn't make you a talented player of an instrument. And when you meet a person who has both talent and technical knowledge and skill sets, then you have the performing artist that people want to really go after and listen to, as opposed to just somebody who's in the orchestra and is just is more of a technician and can bring that kind of competency to it. One question I wanted to ask you two is there a difference between somebody who is talented at something, for example, has an intuitive sense of numbers, versus a charismatic person who is just kind of out there with people and recruits people because the person is so charismatic?
I think you can have both. I'll refer to Albert Einstein, who turned out to be an extremely charismatic person, but also had the scientific mind. Most people would probably think, well, scientists aren't charismatic. Yes, they are. They can be very charismatic. You can have both. Now, let's face it, that's probably a very rare person, but it does exist. And it's something that can be developed. Not the charisma side, but the skills side. And you match the two and you got something powerful there.
Sometimes somebody who has an overabundance of empathy or emotional intelligence might not be the best leader because they're so sensitive, perhaps, or overly sensitive, that they find it difficult and challenging to make decisions.
Exactly. Having charisma and having emotional intelligence does not mean you're going to make the right decisions. It doesn't. And in fact, that can be a very dangerous weapon. The 20th century is full of great charismatic leaders who used it to very poor ends, and in the end, self-destructed.
Example.
Well, of course, the obvious one is Hitler. I mean, everyone goes back to Hitler, but it's because he's a central figure of the 20th century, right? He is an example of so many things that aren't good, but he was also incredibly charismatic. When you think that he took the most advanced company, well, it became a company, didn't it? When he took the most advanced country in the world and was able to lead it down a very dark path, that took a lot of charisma. Not to mention Also one that people refer to as Stalin, and on and on and on. Mussolini, that era produced tremendous leaders who didn't make real good decisions.
So I've observed managers over my career. Some of them were smart, really smart, to the extent that they understood that they themselves were not charismatic. They themselves were not emotionally intelligent to the degree they felt was necessary in order to marshal the talent that they wanted to assemble around them. So what they did was they were very smart at hiring a number two who was the face of that vision, if you will. And it really worked well when the number two and the leader had the same vision and also understood what each other would bring to that vision, in the sense of the one is the brains and the other one is the personality.
Exactly. And that's really sort of the foundation of the oval table and the whole concept of it, that you surround yourself with the people who complement what you do, not the people who do what you do, but the people who do what you can't do as well as they can. I always surrounded my people in the IT world with people who were far smarter than me, who were far better trained and educated than I in the information technology world, because that was a weakness of mine. I could put a team together, but I needed people who were going to go out there and do the nuts and bolts and get it done. And so that's where you get the oval table. You populate it with those people so that you have a high performance team that fires on all cylinders.
If you think through Bill McFarland's interview, for example, he says, if you think you're the smartest guy in the room, you have a problem. And the problem is you. And so I think that's an important thing to consider. If you think through the dog profiles, you can be excellent in any of them, but being charismatic is not required, because most people are not charismatic. So you can be tremendously talented. You can make a tremendous contribution. You can even be the leader of the organization, but you don't have to necessarily be over the top charismatic in order to do that. I think that might be a good observation to make for the most of the people who, frankly, are not charismatic.
It doesn't have to hold you back. That's what you're saying, Doug. Right. Again, back to the example I presented, just hire really well, hire well, and make sure you have the oval table populated with enough points of view to execute the vision and be successful.
If you're a over-the-top charismatic person, do you have to be doing charismatic things? In other words, you have to be out in front and be that kind of a leader, as opposed to maybe more of a technician leader, more of a coordinating leader. But if you're that charismatic, you just have to be out there. And if you hire that kind of a person, is that what you're going to look to see down the road? Is that person just puts themselves out there as that charismatic person?
Well, I'll go back to one of the people that we discussed with Jim, and that's John Wooden. Most unassuming man I've ever been in the presence of. Is there any doubt that he was charismatic? No, not at all. Yet you wouldn't have known it looking at him. He had a quiet, understated charisma. He was not putting himself out there. And I think the mistake that some charismatic people make is, that's the only tool they got. And so they overuse it.
And perhaps we over rely on that, assuming that the person is charismatic, so therefore the person is knowledgeable and talented at the same time.
Right. And that's not necessarily true. Exactly. Yeah.
Because Buster as a character is typically very charismatic, but not necessarily analytically talented.
And for our listeners, Doug's reference to Buster is one of the characters in his book, We Are Alpha Dog. And Buster is the outgoing salesman type who is always out front, always giving energy and positivity to every situation, even when it doesn't necessarily warrant it. So, Buster's the charismatic guy.
And if you're going to move your organization forward in terms of making sales, that is what you need in that spot.
That's right.
You need that charismatic person. You don't necessarily need him in production or in the corporate planning, but you do need it in the sales function.
Absolutely. And that's a great use of charisma. What happens is, I think, when people with great charisma get control of things that they are not good at or that they don't understand, that's where they run aground. They can get people to follow them off the edge of the cliff.
Well, what you're saying, I think, is that just because a person is charismatic doesn't necessarily mean they're either talented or knowledgeable.
And that's why they need to be surrounded by people who do have the skills and the knowledge in the areas that they don't. If charisma is directed and funneled properly, what a great tool. But if it's allowed to just spill out over everything, you're probably heading for trouble down the road. Now, charisma by itself simply doesn't do it.
If you are looking for a competitive advantage, I encourage you to look at the words you use when you promote, speak, and sell. I can help. Talk to me. Fripp.com.
No podcast like ours would be possible without the help of some talented people behind the scenes. We would like to thank Audivita Studios and their Director of Podcast Production, Sean Hedinger, Recording Engineer David Rosenblad, Staging and Show Production David Wolf, Social Media Jay Spang, Artist Marsha Carrington, and for our transcriber, Jamie Karras. We here at the Oval Table all hope that you have a productive and inspirational week. I'm Rishi Katz, and we will see you next time.